Hello, everyone. It is Monday, the 26th of August, 2024. And I did cover a lot of ground yesterday in a lot of my international politics security comments. And so I don't have a whole lot to add today, luckily. I'm saying luckily because this has been an absolute friggin' shit show of events internationally regarding um, just the way we're getting propagandized to have division amongst ourselves, whether it be within our own countries or internationally. And talking to people coming from the UK, and had great discussions regarding Tommy Robinson being a plant, being someone that's also being paid to elicit emotional responses in people and create division. And he is absolutely a plant, a deep state plant, whatever you want to call it. The people that are funding the military, pharmaceutical, industrial complexes and the energy grids that are also fully controlled by certain groups, like the Rockefellers and again, that name sounds conspiratorial, but it's true, and people that have had a lot of control over wealth, resources, assets, communications, people now for again a long time, and they don't care about the social outcomes, societal outcomes, any of that. They're looking at profit margins, and it is what it is. But I did want to bring up a point about Pavel Durov. He's the person that founded Telegram. It's a social media platform, I guess, like a communication platform. If you're not familiar with it, that is more allegedly more secure than just like regular text. Even WhatsApp, Telegram is more secure. And then you have Signal, which I think is a little bit more secure than WhatsApp and and Telegram and regular messaging, but still like not 100%, obviously, which is why I also recommend people get a VPN, a virtual network. I use Proton Plus. I have an upgraded package. I connect from different countries depending on the information that I want to research, and then again going on platforms like this, the Wayback Machine to look at archive data. So I'm bringing all that stuff up because like if there's platforms like Telegram that are being targeted and the people that own them or founded them, then there's going to be a lot more targeted attacks, social media and other attacks on people that want to be on uncensored platforms, want to share information that's not part of the mainstream narrative. And so even X, which was formerly known as Twitter, owned by Elon Musk now, the European Union and people within Europe are threatening to have his platform completely removed from their countries, multiple countries, because they're talking about it being a platform that is like full of right-wing, white supremacist, or what are you going to call it, organizations and groups that are being incentivized to share information on these platforms. And the hypocrisy of this all, when most of the funding now in first world countries is coming from people like Schwab's and the Soroses and the Kissingers of the world, the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, the Lockheed Martins, the JP Morgans, the Rockefellers. These people that are not Canadian or American or affiliated or aligned with our values and morals and culture and ideologies, and nor do they care about, again, like the social impact as in humans. We're part of that, right? The societal outcomes, and because they're looking at profit margins, and they're funding leftist media, they're funding leftist education systems, they're funding leftist banking institutions, they're funding leftist government assets and entities and corporations that work with them. And so people that are considered to be conservative or Republican, and part of these parties, the sponsorships, the donations, the funding is largely being not taken, but like they're not getting it. And it's nowhere near the same comparison as like the funding that they're getting from donors and sponsorships, and then like again, like arbitrary funding that we should be looking more into. They're not getting it nearly to the same degree as people that again are pushing leftist, socialist, communist agendas, again, even within first world countries. And they're calling themselves liberals, they're calling themselves Democrats, and they are clearly not. And if you just look at the platform, and if you understand politics, I have a political science degree, I have multiple degrees, multiple certifications, and including like I'm being in my fourth year. It's on hold right now, but for a science degree at Carleton University, and because they teach pseudoscience and a woke agenda and are largely funded by leftists and commies. A little bit of an exaggeration in that, like by saying commies, not all are commies, but yeah. So like a lot of the funding that's going to places like Carleton University or Johns Hopkins University or Cambridge, again, they're from, I would say, extremists on the left hand side. socialism, communism, these are extreme left political parties. And if you don't know that, then I would highly encourage you to take a look at the graph for, like political affiliations and ideologies and stuff like that, and how it's laid out. I've shared this for years, but you have communism on the far left, you have fascism and far right rulership on the extreme right hand. So extreme left, extreme right, both of these are not great. But you also have to factor in the Y line. So you've got the X, and then you've got the Y. And so at the top, it's a complete authoritarian, which means that it's complete government control over the people. And then you have the very bottom extreme in that whatever you want to call it, umbrella. That's anarchy. So you have extreme left, extreme right systems of governance and platforms. And then that's also coupled by, and it's very important, the degree of governance or rulership that the society's government has in place. And so if it's complete authoritarian regimes, this is also not good. And again, but left and right can also have 100% government control. And if you look at North Korea, if you look at multiple European countries within World War II, these were socialist communist countries. And if you look at the mass crimes against humanity that were incurred towards Jewish people, towards Catholics, for Holodomor with the mass suffering, this was all government controlled. And then the staged and planned events that elicited more response in people to further involve people in more retaliation, more violence within these war periods. It was largely influenced by communism and socialism, Marxism, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know. And so yeah, I'm already 6.5 minutes in. But I did want to further carry on with the video that I started yesterday. I did have to run off. I was busy yesterday, and so I couldn't finish it. I will do that. And there's another video as well that I'm going to share with people again regarding MK Ultra. And it's by a guest that Joe Rogan had on his show, Tom O'Neill. And it was posted over 4 years ago. So again, sometimes Joe Rogan gets on really good guests. I don't know if this is one of them. And sometimes he gets on guests that are part of the mainstream media narrative or the woke agenda, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and people like him that have no idea what they're talking about. They don't. And it's all scripted media too. When it looks like they appear to know what they're talking about, it's all stuff that's been rehearsed. But yeah, I think he's part of the propaganda machine as well. And Bill Gates and people like that, I was going to say I have no time for. I would be interested in talking to these people because I would just love to know what's going on in their fucking minds. Oh my goodness. Like, what are you thinking regarding this? What are you thinking regarding this? Anyway, it is what it is. But I would love to get on the Joe Rogan show or Sean Ryan. But that takes people reaching out to these men and providing my name and my contact information. Yeah, I have a lot I can talk about. And so can people like Austin Whitsitt. But instead, people get on people that have an agenda and or misrepresent the information that people like me want to share. And they come at it from an angle that is not conducive to getting the actual truth out there. And so I'm talking about even when, what was his name? I know his name. He's very popular online. Patrick Bet David. Valuetainment. Anyways, the guy from Valuetainment, he's a very smart guy, very hardworking, very family oriented, very religious. I do have a lot of respect for him and his and what he shares, but also sometimes he gets it wrong, just like me. I'm not perfect either. And so he's had on a guest in recent history regarding discussions surrounding flat Earth. Much so in that is trying to be helpful, but with the angle of with the religious angle that's also being incorporated into the arguments. And again, I don't know how helpful that was to the community when there are people like Eric Dubay and Mark Sargent and Dave Weiss and Austin Whitsitt and myself and others that could explain things not from that angle and would give more examples of scientific examples or evidence to counter the narrative and not rely on the Bible. There are definitely multiple verses within the Bible that correlate to this being a flat stationary earth. but there's also archived NASA documents and Army publications and witness accounts, and there's so much more that can be shared that again, that's not eliciting emotional response, and people that are not religious or don't follow that specific religion that are just going to tune it out and not listen to it because they don't understand it, they haven't read it, they don't understand that this is that this is all like a it's based on truth, but it's not factual. Anyway, on with the show. So we were talking yesterday before I cut it off about Alan Dulles, and Gottlieb, and their heavy involvement in Project Bluebird, which then became the MK Ultra Project Paperclip, Overcast, whatever you want to call it, projects afterwards. They're always renaming things. It is what it is.
And techniques. And then Sidney proposed as Project Artichoke, and that was led by Sidney. At the time, he was using drugs and attempts to like break their ego control in order to like elicit information for like interrogation techniques. And then Sidney proposed the idea of brain warfare to Dulles in 1953. That's known as MK Ultra. He wanted to do something bigger than just kind of like interrogation techniques, more to do with like overall like brain warfare. So at that time, there were American psychiatrists recruited that included Dr. James Hamilton, Dr. Robert Hyde, and Dr. Louise Jolyon West. I think that's how you say it. The psychiatrists researched and tested effects of various drugs in relation to an individual's psychological state or consciousness. So that's when we can start to see the allies with psychiatrists and then pharmaceuticals kind of like happening, because when they were experimenting on these people and using specific drugs, then the pharmaceutical companies were being paid by the CIA to do that. So a very big American pharmaceutical company named Eli Lilly was behind a couple of these big sub-projects of MK Ultra. They were paid by the CIA $400,000 for bulk purchases of LSD. So yeah, quite the intermingling of various like big companies. And this is happening right here in America. Yeah. So just keep in mind, if this sounds to you like...
There's also CIA involvement in drug trafficking in the Middle East and in Western Asia, even during this period as well. And again, there's archived data and accounts, unclassified information. This is irrefutable evidence at this point, ladies and gentlemen. So I've shared videos on this. MK Ultra, I've shared videos on this for years. But again, I like to reintroduce information that is very important to what's going on right now to show you the parallels, the similarities, and again, lest we forget.
Nazi ideology or not, but to me, it really does. I mean, this is happening right here. And there were also like other allies for these sub projects of MK Ultra. Some of them had like kind of weird backgrounds, like magicians. There was a magician, John Mulholland, I think is how you say it. He was an ally because he was known to be the master of psychology and deception. He was enlisted by Sidney to write a manual on how to use magician stage techniques for distraction and deception. And this magician guy eventually went on to publish some work titled The Official CIA Manual of Trickery and Deception. So we can see the CIA pulling in all these different players from like other physicians, other biochemists, pharmacologists, all of that kind of thing. In 1954, at the APA convention, Sidney's officers learned about a doctor there, Dr. Donald Olding Hebb. he's known as like the father of neuropsychology. So he studies like neuroplasticity and kind of like how your brain functions. A lot of his studies had to do with like sensory deprivation experiments or like different like vibrations and buzzes and like noises state. There was another guy who basically adapted Hebb's experiments by the name of Donald Owen Cameron, and he was actually a psychiatrist up in Canada. Now, the CIA became specifically interested in Cameron because he wanted to go a step further past Hebb's experiment.
Yeah.
And
I talked about this yesterday too. Connections between group that are absolutely enabling this false narrative that's been going on for many, many years. And my science degree, again, my fourth year is on hold, was cognitive science degree. So not only have I done the advanced interview interrogation courses, the ISATs, the conduct after capture pieces, this is all heavily like revolved around like human behavior and psychological operations and all that stuff. But also with my work experience as well for like over 23 years now working, seeing like that these events and projects and programs and events have had on like large scale, globally, internationally, because again, this is not a globe. Yeah, I said what I said, but Cameron, I mentioned him before as well, and out of Montreal and doing this during this period of time as well. And yeah, and people want to say that Canada has no impact or influence. Well, maybe not the country itself, but there are a small amount of people within that that do.
Really wanted.
And this is the same thing in the UK, New Zealand, Australia, Ecuador, people that are embedded within these societies that are assisting with enabling these types of propaganda machines and campaigns. And I'll reiterate, Johns Hopkins University and Cambridge, people need to fully investigate that further and see just the psychological operations that are being run through there and the propaganda.
To like induce hypnosis, including like clinical coma.
And just for anyone new, which there's probably not anyone new, but if you look at Johns Hopkins University, I will give the examples again of the 18th of October 2019 with Tabletop Operation 201. This was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and set the scene for the pandemic. And then Claydex the year prior, just prior to an international military training operation, and then you've got Cambridge, where even with the King James version of the Bible that was created in 1611 by possibly Sir Francis Bacon, which gave Shakespeare the accolades and the prestige involved in like all these great works that he possibly didn't write himself, right? And so Cambridge prints and distributes that they're the ones that own the rights. The monarchy essentially owns the rights to the King James version of the Bible, and it's printed and released out of Cambridge. And Cambridge has also been under fire or investigated, whatever you want to call it, over the years. And even Mark Zuckerberg was also part of the trials because he was giving information from Facebook, data mining. He was giving it to Cambridge, and they were using that information. And again, this is public record. This was in the courts in order to elicit emotional response in people. They were able to get people to do protests. They were able to get protests created in third world countries, you name it. And this was years ago. And I would argue first world countries as well. And then also changing election results and outcomes. And so that's very significant, very significant. And Facebook is a large social media platform. And again, for years, this data mining and collection that happened, whether people knew it or not, your information was getting tracked and monitored, and by these institutions, and it was being used as a weapon against us. And so, not to sound dramatic, it's just reality. And yeah, we need to pay more attention to that stuff. This all needs to be stuff that's mitigated in a peaceful way, accessing our higher levels of emotion and cognitive abilities. And it takes being courageous and speaking up in a peaceful way, I'll reiterate, but then also in the justice system and the legal systems, trying to get people to be held accountable for crimes against humanity and the stuff that they're doing. And we need to Oh my God, I was going to say too, there's this woman, I believe is in the UK. There's obviously more to the story that I need to look at, but she's apparently in jail or was in jail for 2 years because of having on her vehicle a decal that said it's okay to be white. And so that's just what the mainstream media is pushing out there. Like, I wouldn't even say mainstream. I would say that people that are pretending to be independent, but still get a large platform and audience because they're being funded by political parties that are affiliated with what their messaging is. But there must be more to it than that. But that stuff is very discouraging for people that want to share the truth, or at least show like a different perspective, or even just like rock the boat a little bit. Like, again, and it's just but to be jailed for 2 years over saying that it's okay to be white in the UK, like I'm hoping there's way more to it than that. Why she got arrested, when people that are rapists and murderers are getting removed from prison systems to make room, apparently, for people that that elicit hate speech, or that provide hate speech content online. But again, this is all based on people's perception of what being offensive is and what a hate crime is. It's all ridiculous, and it's not all ridiculous, but there's already rules in place for people that incite violence and crimes on social media platforms or in person. And so we already have that. So if people are getting targeted because they have a flag on their social media, or a flag, flag like flying outside their home, that's also considered offensive to a lot of people now. And yeah, I've shared even videos where people are asked on the streets, like, what are your thoughts on people if they have their American flag or their Canadian flag flying outside their door, and immediately people on all spectrums are saying that could be perceived as being racist, could be perceived as being a right-wing supremacist, all of this stuff. And without even knowing who's inside the house, there's people that are saying that elicits emotional response in people, and seen as racist. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, now my Canadian flag is offensive to people. Yeah, and so I was having a discussion about this today. Like, if law enforcement came to my house and said that I needed to remove my Canadian flag, I would be respectful, but I would not, and I might get fucking charged for it. I might get arrested for it. But it was one of those things where, like, some people have to stand up for what they believe in when they know that they're getting, like, arbitrarily harassed or questioned or interrogated or interviewed or whatever, and understand the law, understand our rights and freedoms, and then try to speak out on overreach, right? Because we're getting to extreme levels here. It's just anyway, I'll keep this going on because I'm rambling. I'm so sorry.
In order to compare psychological breakdown to criminals and like breaking down under interrogation. So he became one of the biggest allies of like the CIA.
Yep.
And he also wrote a paper on psychic.
Yep. November, always with the good points. Yeah. So John Hopkins was made up of a bunch of bullshit death numbers in like government health sites, actually even showing that they were exaggerating, embellishing the numbers. Inflating the numbers is what they like to call it, because when you say embellishing or exaggerating numbers, it doesn't sound as good to the world, right? They have great marketing and advertisement teams that allow them to, select like the right wording to make it look not to make it sound and look like it's not what it actually is, which is government overreach. Anyway, yeah, so they were really pushing the psyops and stuff like that at the beginning. And that were used to institute mask and distancing mandates. Absolutely correct. And then they later walked it back. Yep.
Driving, having like the ability to accelerate the therapeutic reorganization of patients. So that basically means de-patterning. So kind of breaking someone down. Those techniques used to break someone down in order to build them back up the way you want.
Yeah.
Which that is basically what MK Ultra is about. Breaking someone down using various techniques in order to build someone up the way you want.
Oh shoot, so this is the guy. This is like the stuff, you read about all this stuff, but I didn't realize. So Cameron's the one who wanted to take it a step further, and he's the one who like made this hypnosis, ECT, all this stuff like come alive in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy too, because I found this paper and there's some more information down below on it, but some claim to say that maybe Cameron didn't really know what he was getting into when he was recruited by the CIA. The CIA paid him out $69,000 for his experiments. So, like, it's hard to say, was Cameron.
This was almost $70,000 in the 50s. So that was a lot more money back then than it is. It's a lot of money now, but it's a lot more money back then.
Thing he wanted to do, or was he just like a puppet of the psychiatry field being used for knowledge by the CIA? So people don't really know, but either way, Cameron got himself involved in very sketchy stuff. And from that, the Sydney guy was able to launch like various MK Ultra sub projects.
Correct.
And really like dive deep into all of this stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know something interesting too is from what I found, Cameron, one of the same psychiatrists who was present at the Nuremberg trials in order to condemn people for allowing like, all these bad, terrible experiments happening on people in Germany. So he was one who was a psychiatrist there. Like in Canada, where
most people that watch my stories know this, but most of the crimes against humanity that were committed in World War II, and this was in the last 12 months of the war, Germany. So Germany was seen as right wing. Every other fucking country, and I've shared this, I'm sorry for swearing, was communist socialist and had been for at least several years. And it's so Poland and Hungary and Ukraine, like these were the areas where you had the death camps, you had the concentration camps largely, and where most people, okay, and I still say that this was a class war, even by government people and doctors and medics and security and guards that all enabled all of these crimes against humanity, built these fucking gas huts and stuff like that. But again, most of these crimes and atrocities happened in socialist, communist countries. Should have heavily involved the people that it didn't. And I've talked also about the Reichstag or the Reichstag incident, where which is Parliament in German, but where Adolf Hitler staged and planned a fire and blamed it on an extremist socialist, and this guy was hung. This guy, and he was the one that was blamed for the fire. He's not the one that created it. This has all come out in court documents that I was able to find. And then even a guard at the time, which he actually, like, on the record, like a German law enforcement officer, he actually drove this guy. I'm so sorry. I do have videos on him and what happened. And he was driven to Parliament and was already on fire. And so these court documents show the accounts and minutes and stuff like that, like the people that write out like the transcripts and stuff like that, what people say. And he Parliament and then after that, within days, there was policies and rules or mandates, whatever you want to call it, that were initiated by Adolf Hitler to further oppress and control the society. And so again, it's a bit of a mess. Yeah.
where he was like practicing, I think that's where he was, right, in Canada. He was pretty much doing the same exact thing. He was doing all of this evil experimentation too.
Wow. Okay.
And I've shared the Stanford prison experiments and Universe 25 stuff. Take a look at that stuff and just see. Also during this period, and even recent stuff, how far professionals will go in order to
about this. Jeez, what a dick.
Basically, the roots of MK Ultra go back to the psychology and psychiatry, and these psychologists and psychiatrists have roots leading back to Nazi Germany. So it's just step by step, like NIA are still there in today's psychology and psychiatry world.
Yeah, I mean, you have something in here that I think is really important in this first snippet about how a patient's personality set can be temporarily broken up and possibly done a bunch of stuff. Like, there's a ton of personality disorders out there. You know what I mean? Like, all I think now is, oh, this was all made up, propped up by the DSM pharmaceutical companies in bed, make money. My gosh.
Mm-hmm. And we've touched on it before, like if we scroll down in our document a little bit about like the anatomical figure there. This was a government document that we had found in a previous podcast, and it has to do with like frequencies of like sound waves and at what vibrations they are able to control or impact different parts of our body. And so when we read about some of Cameron's research and frequencies and all of that, when it came to like the CIA and MK Ultra.
So even that is it's even more advanced present day with the I mean, it was called Havana syndrome at one point too, where people within government believed that their minds were getting controlled by like EMP technologies. But again, this is something that transcended Havana. Again, it's because it was being reported from there, just like the Spanish flu. Like they blame that on Spain. It wasn't Spain. Like people all over the world are reporting that they believe that they are being targeted by EMP technologies, and that's also used to jam equipment and reception, so that people can't record things like during main events as well. It's used to harass people in areas where they don't want people to be. It's just too much for the brain. So like even homeless people, for example, are transients that congregate like under bridges or like main service areas or locations. There are people that are employing like this type of technology or like harassing sounds in order to essentially harass people enough or torture people enough to leave or create some kind of cognitive dissonance or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, and they've gotten a lot better. And then even with what we call like nuclear explosions, which could just be possibly like just like high amounts of TNT, who knows? Definitely manipulating the elements to have like more efficient explosions, but following these large explosions, it's always followed by EMPs, EMFs that cause outages, that cause damage to infrastructure, even like hundreds of miles, thousands of miles away, depending on how strong the explosion or blast is, and then the follow-on effects.
This stuff is still the same thing. Things that they're doing to us today, maybe on not as like a big of an impact at one period of time, but over a period of time, like with our phones and with like, you know, before, it's the same stuff that.
Thanks again, November. Okay, so optogenetics. I highly recommend Witsit's Zombies stream. Excellent dive into that. I am definitely going to take a look at that. Probably today. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, this is a good. And talk about nanoparticles and nanotechnology. It's seen as very conspiratorial right now, but it's not. And then people can control. It's crazy. Until the professionals or the experts start talking about it, and then people tend to believe it, and then mainstream media, who's funded by these fucking people,
they're trying to impact and like on our human body, you know, mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever it might be. And then we show up to a psychologist or psychiatrist and we get diagnosed, but it could be directly because they're doing this to us. Because these diagrams we've gone over before, you know, and this is the way that they MK Ultra people now.
Yep.
Like that's very common, and people would never even know. You wouldn't even know.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh.
And the dates are kind of interesting too. You know what I think would be really cool eventually is if we made a very big like timeline of everything and just kind of stuck things in there to kind of see like how this all played out. Because on this anatomical diagram, we can see the date of this kind of stuff was happening with the APA too, and the DSM being shifted and everything. But it would be very interesting to kind of see that all play out.
Right, yeah, everything seems like a precursor. It's like Kreplin was a precursor to Nazism, and between that time, they were trying to revamp the DSM, and the CIA is like, oh, the 1950s. Before that, we weren't doing anything, but
It's being
I
used.
think before
Yep.
1951, that the MK Ultra, I don't think it was called that. It was like Bluebird. It was called a bunch of different things before that too. So I'm sure
Yep.
that's just the documented
Artichoke.
version of it too. But that'd be really cool. We should do that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. And then you had here something really good about kind of a step further into a very specific diagnosis that is tied to MK Ultra and CIA, like multiple personality disorder and FOIAs, and then all of that.
Yeah, so I have here a snippet from basically a summary of the book. I think it's called, let me see, it's called Bluebird by Colin Ross on multiple personalities disorders creation. He basically talks about the creation. It was created out of the CIA subprojects, hence Nazism in a sense as well, because this is all just experience
Lost me. Sorry about that. Yeah, I am looking into Starlink because of my internet issues, even though I don't like that concept because he's part of the military industrial complex. And yeah.
Through stimulation of brain electrodes. The overall goal was clear: to control the mind and the behavior, to create disassociation through the combination of drugs, hypnosis, brain electrode implant.
I did back it up a little bit, but before I even get into that, I just wanted to say that the who I was talking about for the Reichstag fire, the name was Marinus van der Lubbe. So I'll just read a little bit into that. 24-year-old Dutch council communist was arrested and charged with setting fire to the Reichstag building on February 27th, 1933. During the trial, van der Lubbe confessed to the crime. There's a reason. And on January 28th, 1934, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. He was executed by beheading on January 10th, 1934. Key points. Van der Lubbe was the only person convicted of starting the Reichstag fire, despite some theories suggesting Nazi involvement or a false flag operation. So they're literally saying that in the key points, and that is in fact true. And it did come out to be true. And again, I've shown this on other videos as well, where there was even accounts and testimony from actual Nazis that actually admitted to driving him to the Reichstag building, and the fire had already been set, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways, the trial was widely criticized for its lack of due process and political motivations. Van der Lubbe's execution was carried out despite posthumous pardons granted by the German government in 2008, 75 years after his death, right? That's when these court documents were getting released and people like myself were sharing this stuff. And so posthumously pardoned. The Reichstag fire and subsequent trial played a significant role in the Nazi regime's consolidation of power and suppression of political opposition. So like I was saying, this is just better said, to be honest with you. And like I was saying, the consolidation of power that happened within days of that event. So just leads me to believe that this was something that was staged and planned. And again, it was. And that's why when you look at things like the January 6th events, 9/11, you look at the Freedom Convoy, these are all things that would suggest that there's possibly, and there was, government involvement of people who are corrupted. Not all, very small minority of people, but there's a lot of people that are just standing by and allowing this to happen, watching it happen, knowing it's wrong, and they're doing nothing about it. And it's their job.
Electric shock, and beaming different kinds of energy through the brain. They also did this on people. So I'm going to get into the next part here, which is scary. Brain electrode experiments were also conducted in humans. Dr. Jose Delgado, a neurosurgeon and professor at Yale, received funding for brain electrode research on children and adults. He was able to control the movements of his animals and human subjects by pushing buttons on a remote transmitter box. In one paper, Dr. Delgado describes the cats as mechanical toys. So just think about that. And that's on page 87-11. And it's all here as well. We'll link the PDF to it. These are basically CIA memorandums. This isn't us just talking out of our asses. And the last part is the scariest part, because it talks about an 11-year-old boy. So an 11-year-old boy underwent a partial change of identity upon remote stimulation of his brain electrodes. So electrical stimulation of the superior temporal convolution induced feminine striving and confusion about his own sexual identity. The patient, an 11-year-old boy, said, "I was thinking whether I was a boy or a girl, which I'd like to be. And I'd like to be a girl. After one of the stimulations, the patient suddenly began to discuss his desire to get married to the male interviewer." What
Oh
does that
my gosh.
doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah. Also something that I was mentioning, that there was the trans movement within Germany, even pre-World War I and around that time, where there were clinics that were created, and again, to do testing on subjects, humans. And it was I only know of men, wanted to transition into being women, and so it wasn't just wearing clothing and stuff like that, but actual operations and surgeries that were being conducted. So this is something that has spanned the ages. It's not anything new. So anyone that thinks this woke agenda is new, it's not, and it's also what led to wars in the past for both these narratives. And when I was talking about the Freedom Convoy, my example, to the consolidating power and getting more control over the society and the suppression of the political opposition, is because that's exactly what they wanted to do. Like Justin Trudeau, I'm naming him, right, and Marco Mendicino and David Lametti and Bill Blair wanted to create some kind of an event, a false flag event. And they, with the Freedom Convoy, that was absolutely successful, but they wanted to have a riot or a large scale event that happened because they wanted to employ, government assets and stuff like that, make it seem like it was something that was bigger than what it was, or something that it wasn't. Again, they wanted to paint the Freedom Convoy as a group of, right wing white supremacist types, that racist to declare the emergency wanted to do, or what they did. Correction, what they actually did during World War II and then 9/11 and January 6th and sent to even to financial institutions. And there was absolutely financial implications and ramifications for people even donating and or even supporting the cause. And so these financial institutions were doing things like declining people for mortgages, accepting them for lower mortgages. They were not getting approved for home insurance, things like this. And again, it was just it was a means to punish people and people that were not on the right on the appropriate political side or ideology, like the woke movement, right? If they weren't part of that, then again, we were seen as the enemy, which we're not. People were not. We're trying to help you guys too. Oh my goodness. And yes, the government overreach, and then it transcended those lines, and it also impacted people financially, and then people were getting targeted by law enforcement, and then having to fight this by means of charges, by means of like arrests and having to go to the courts and pay for lawyers and all that stuff that people had to do, and they're still in the courts, right? Tamara Leach might get 10 years in jail. Helen Gruce is still in the courts. Her next trial date is January 2025. Ridiculous. And she was suspended during that first weekend of the Freedom Convoy, a hero, and also someone like myself that was trying to make this peaceful. We were talking about the plants, the staging and planning false flag operations. Don't get duped by that stuff. Talked about the role players, crisis actors, et cetera, et cetera. And then also tried to share the medical, scientific, and government data to our peers and colleagues and supervisors and upper level management and stuff like that, and cabinet members, and it was getting completely ignored. And so still in the courts, hundreds of thousands. So financially crippling people is also a military tactic, by the way, and they were targeting people's basic human requirements to survive. So you have that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or whatever you want to call it, or wants, and you've got at the bottom of the pyramid, like for the foundation, like the very foundation that's needed in order to access your higher levels of consciousness and self-actualize. At the top of the freaking pyramid, at the lower level, it's things like air. Okay, first on the list for me as well, right? Like you need like the 3-3-3 rule, like 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Possibility of dying, very, very high, right? You need these things in order to live. And also on that list is shelter, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so air, water, food, shelter, especially in fucking Canada, right? With the extreme weather conditions that we experience and things like that. So mortgages were doubled, and there's been so much targeted at especially the middle class and stuff like that as well, but targeting people that are not voting in the way that the current leaders want us to vote, and again, or pushing the same agendas that people are getting paid to push, and that they want us to push as well, affecting their bottom line, right? Or their fucking money they're getting from international stuff like that. These people that are literally directing and mandating these woke ideologies that we're trying to resist. Anyways, I'm going on all these tangents, but it has been a while since I've been on. See if I can share this video again. It's almost over. But yeah, just again, it's just a lot. But innocent civilians were profoundly impacted, and people that work in government. Helen Gruce has over 23 years of service in Ottawa Police Services, and then she also does higher level contracts because of her expertise, colleagues, and or hearing accounts of people that were again like kicked out, suspended, charged because of not getting the shot, and or attending the Freedom Convoy and things like that. Even though they weren't even in uniform, because they were still of service, they were found to be in these in these movements. They were charged, despite the fact that I've also shared an account who was movement, and so out of protest for the trans ideology, and he didn't get charged or suspended or any repercussions. So again, this is what I'm talking about. There's so much of a fucking bias, and it's so obvious that that people on the left, no matter how extreme they are, no matter what they say, threatening to kill people, threatening to harm women and children, no matter what they do or say, like calling white people the lowest of the low, like, no matter what they say, it doesn't matter. But if someone on the right counters extreme vilification, anyway, I hope people are seeing the hypocrisy in this. I'm hoping. Let's see. I'm gonna give it a second. Well, that's more than a second, but I think that being gay is a mental disorder. So like I do agree that I have plenty of video.
Removed being gay, like homosexual, from the DSM. So then he was like, "Well, I'm not mentally ill, I guess. So this is not going to be a mental illness."
Oh, well, maybe he was. He was part of the gay rights activist groups, and there could have been either a political component or maybe he was gay and it was for personal reasons, just like that other guy that didn't want to add the personality disorder. And it wasn't like these were like, there wasn't one intern at those DSM task force voting groups. And that person also admitted to seeing them do this voting system and thought, what the heck is happening? But all of the other ones were psychiatrists, practicing psychiatrists. So the whole thing sounds like just a bunch of people who got power for all the wrong reasons and probably got paid in the pocket by some pharma company at the time. Maybe Pfizer was called something else. I don't know. Maybe Eli Lilly or whatever. I know they're different.
Yeah, I know, right? Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
Holy cow. That's crazy. So, and yeah, so being like homosexual is no longer in the DSM-5, but I'm pretty sure that gender dysphoria is still in the current DSM-5 or DSM-5 TR, which is kind of interesting.
That is interesting, actually. Do you think they'll take that out, or what do you think?
They should not.
I wonder, because so it's kind of a big section. I started kind of looking at it. It's like around like page like 511 or something, 511, and I was gonna read it soon and kind of see if it leans towards the liberal mindset, like kind of biased in some way. But it's very weird that it's still kind of like talked about in the DSM. Let me see real quick if being gay is in there. Nope.
No, in 1973, it says the APA removed the diagnosis of homosexuality from the second edition of the DSM. So, and like I said, Robert Spitzer was part of that. But I know that in order to get certain hormone medications, you have to have that diagnosis stamped off, kind of rubber stamped from your psychiatrist or whomever is treating you. And then you could get hormone treatment. So what I wonder is, so remember, at this point, they're going from 106 to 200 and 200 and something, 290 something to 270 something. All of this also branches off to medical coding and what can be insured or not. So they might keep it in there to get paid because gender dysphoria is a huge moneymaker. I mean, gender affirming surgeries, come on. Creating fake penises.
Maladaptive.
I mean, they're flimsy, but they cost that's money making right there. That's a lifetime patient.
Right. And gender dysphoria, by having it in the DSM, it's broad enough where pretty much any of whatever the LGBTQIA plus whatever pretty much can fall under that, you know?
Right. And they don't have to even take it out to be politically correct at this point. They've already cuckolded the mass majority of Westerners and have said I guess you're bigoted, you're against this person, this guy who looks like a dude going into a woman's bathroom kind of thing. So like it's so easy now to just, it's like us talking about conspiracies. Maybe back in the day, there's only like a handful of people and that was looked at as a threat, but it's a little bit more saturated at this point. So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm just talking. So
yeah, well, because the DSM is written in a very biased way where it would make people like us seem like the psychotic ones. Like they want to make us seem crazy to like other people. They want to make it the new norm that mental illness is like a thing, but it's only a thing because of all these experiments. And then also a lot of people, I feel like, this kind of way about them with like learned helplessness where they keep going back to these things. They almost want to be victims. They want to have an excuse or a reason of why they're like acting a certain way. And now they can be labeled by a doctor and that's now their current excuse. And it's just this like loop of people that don't actually want to help themselves. They want to be victims of MK Ultra, apparently.
Right. And then like you think about it. So like you said, they don't have to target us and pick us up off the street and hypnotize us in, I guess, the sinister ways they did it in the 1950s to the 1970s on paper from the CIA MK Ultra stuff. They can do it from the television. They can do it through any and every means. So you name it, it's probably able to be done. So maybe they're hitting up a bunch of kids through Disney channels, through media channels, and hypnotizing them through certain commercials, 432 hertz to 440. Like there's the whole hypnotized component to it that you think it's not going to happen to me, that it can happen to you. And there's also the other element, Mani, that I think is demonic about this whole thing as well.
Oh, totally. Yes, 100%. Man, there's so many different like roots, really.
Yeah.
All of it ties back to just demonic roots, ultimately. Yes.
Yep.
Wow. And it's like, it's not that we're saying that like therapy is bad for you, you know, and like, I think there are instances where therapy can be very helpful. But now with the knowledge of where all of this came from, there has to be some other better solution. And I think a lot of the solutions to look for nowadays, instead of just like remaining in that victim state, is like understanding that, like, I don't know, I guess the potentials of why you may be struggling with something, and then like looking for other ways out of it rather than pharmaceuticals, and rather than being labeled by a psychologist or a psychiatrist with a disorder or mental illness. There have to be like other preventative ways too, you know, to stay like physically and mentally and emotionally healthy.
Yeah. No, I agree. You need to start from step one. What do you eat? Do you go outside? All that stuff. I agree 100%.
Yep. And then I guess as we close out, we can kind of mention there's a really good movie on Amazon Prime. It's called The Report, and it's based on a true story. where the CIA uses psychologists to learn EIT, which stands for Enhanced Interrogation Techniques. This has to do directly like with the September 11th attacks and two specific psychologists actually, but the movie is very good. It's a very good, clear picture about all the things we kind of talked about today. And the crazy thing was that the CIA and the Department of Defense paid these psychologists more than $80 million to learn their basically torture techniques. And we'll kind of share a movie trailer at the very end, but this is something that's still kind of going on at Guantanamo Bay, and lawsuits and things like that still going on. All right. Well, thank you for joining us this week on all the craziness with the DSM and how it's tied to the CIA and Nazi ideology. While all of this is still very prevalent today, we do have opportunities to kind of work through it and have different resolutions. We will link a lot of the PDFs and research that we found, as well as little video clips. Please like, subscribe, or comment if you have any other questions, or if you have any other ideas. And also, I think it would be interesting eventually to do a deep dive into more of like the demonic possession and how that has to do with potential mental illness today too. So
yeah, again, demonic possession stuff. Yeah, you lost me on that. I'm sorry. Yeah, I believe that people have the capacity to be good or evil. This is based on our own state of mind. Perception is reality, and just like Indigenous people have said in the past, where it depends on what wolf you feed, which one is going to survive or dominate. And so, if you feed the good wolf or the white wolf, then that's a good thing. If you feed the dark wolf or the dark wolf, whatever, because it's a white and black wolf's comparison, then that's the one that survives or thrives. Same thing with people. Like the more we consume negative, dark content and come at life in a very negative, dark way, accessing our lower levels of emotions like anger and fear, and things like that, then like this is what I believe like the demonic possession stuff is. It's just us enacting our own perception of reality, and yeah, that's why I think that like de-stressing, meditation, accessing your higher levels of consciousness and emotions like compassion and courage and love and things like that is very important, because that's how you counteract the stuff, right? So angels and demons, I don't believe that these are physical, like real things. I don't. I do believe that these are all representative or symbolic of humans and our capacity to be good or evil based on what we do at the individual level to be there for ourselves and for others, like for the collective. And that's just where I sit with that. We'll see if this other video can be shared without disrupting my internet connection too much. This is the Joe Rogan one I was talking about. And then I want to go and see what November I was talking about regarding optogenetics from Austin Whitsitt. Not for this video because I'm already an hour in. But we'll see if this one plays. Mm-hmm. So good. Yeah. Seymour Hirsch has been leading edge, like this friggin' guy, man. So exposing MK Ultra, he was even one of the first ones that was well, myself included, but that was talking about Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2, and who actually blew them up.
military people that they could implant messages, send them, across dangerous areas where there were, at that time it was the Vietnam War, and deliver messages and then have them wiped from their memory in case they were captured. They had all kinds of objectives. So Roger Smith was supervising Manson when he became he was able to do exactly what the MK Ultra program had been trying to create and do for, at that point, about 15, 17 years, when it was all exposed in the 70s, and there were these.
I'm going to stop this for a second. Yeah, I'm going to start downloading these videos first before I stream. That's a great idea.
The Rockefeller Commission hearings, and the church hearings, and then finally Senators Ted Kennedy and Daniel Inouye held hearings. The CIA admitted that they had done this, but no one would say exactly what they did. All the records had been destroyed when the two people who ran it, Richard Helms, who had become the director of the CIA in the 60s, and Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who was kind of the mad scientist who had supervised they had safe houses in San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, where they would experiment on people that were lured into these apartments and houses that were either brothels or hippie communes or whatever. And the people who were working at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic that was run by another Smith, he had given an office to a scientist named Jolly West, Louis J. West. When the hearings occurred in the 70s, identified as a top MK Ultra researcher. He was an academic, come out of the military, had been at the University of Oklahoma, sorry, and then UCLA running the psychiatric divisions. He denied ever being involved in MK Ultra. And this was one of the moments, I think it was 2001, when, things reporting was, I learned in the summer that Manson became exactly what the CIA was trying to create. And I knew, actually, I'd interviewed West about 7 years before for a story I did about celebrity stalkers, the people who were obsessed with stars and then only to kill them or try to kill them. And he was an expert in violence, hypnotism, brainwashing, and he was the chair of ed when his name came up in the Manson story. And there wasn't a lot of, I guess there was a lot of Google then, or a little bit, but when I did a little research, I found out that there had been these allegations that he'd been involved in MK Ultra. He always denied it. He was never prosecuted, never even investigated. He went to his grave threatening to sue anybody that said he would have anything to do with this kind of a program. Again, through another long story, but I got access to his files, which they had never been processed when I called. And when I made the request, it took them 2 or 3 months to process the papers. I went through them through the whole summer looking for a needle in a haystack. And it was intuition, gut. I just thought there might be something there. And sure enough, I eventually found it. It was correspondence between Jolly West and Sidney Gottlieb, the doctor that ran MK Ultra, beginning in 1953, about conducting experiments on people without their knowledge to get them to have amnesia of the acts after they were programmed, and everything that he had been accused of, created the blueprint for the whole program with Gottlieb. The fact that all these kind of interesting research programs merged at the Haight, at the clinic, and then Manson came out of it with the power to do exactly what the MK Ultra had been trying to create for up to that point, I thought was worth investigating further. And that's why I kept going and going and going.
They did a lot of crazy shit back then. Are you aware of Operation Midnight Climax?
Those were the safe houses in San Francisco.
Well, that was the brothel version of it. Yeah, where they lured these Johns into these brothels and then dosed them up with LSD and studied them.
Yeah, George Hunter White was the head CIA guy, and he would sit behind a two-way or one-way mirror and watch the Johns would be dosed with LSD. They tried aerosols or just drinks, different things, and then they would study their behaviors.
Aerosols.
Yeah, aerosol sprays.
Really?
Yeah.
But that would get the prostitutes too then, no?
No, the prostitutes would get them in there, and then they go to the bathroom or something,
Oh,
or
and
to
then
be
they'd
in the
spray
bathroom.
'em?
Yeah.
Oh,
And again,
Jesus.
the problem is the records are so scant because Helms ordered Gottlieb to destroy all the records in 1973 when the two men left the agency. And the only reason anybody ever discovered that it existed was a whistleblower, somebody who used to work for the State Department who remembered that there were records in a warehouse, and they were just financial records from the beginning of the program in 52 until the end, and the possible end in 73. And it was just financial records of where research took place, how much was spent, what kind of equipment was bought, but nothing about the content. The guy that found that ended up testifying to Congress and working with Seymour Hersh to expose it. Was named John Marks. He wrote the first book about MK Ultra that came out in the mid to late 70s called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate. And after he wrote his book, he never, he spoke, did a little bit of a tour, and then retreated into obscurity and never would do an interview again until I approached him in the early 2000s. And when I told him what I had found in West's files, these documents, he agreed to meet with me at his townhouse in Washington, D.C. And he told me, he said, the reason I stopped talking or writing about this was people were camping out on my front lawn, telling me that they'd been victims of MK Ultra. He goes, I thought that they were subject to the hospital patients, Johns, hippies, people that had no idea that this was going on for 25 years. So Marx became the authority. So he had never given an interview about 10 or 12 or 15 pages that grew eventually, because I kept going back to the files and getting more. He said it was the most unredacted, uncensored account of what the real objectives were and what was really being done. He said, if I had had that, my whole book would have been different. So that's one of the problems about saying, well, how much did they do or how far did they go? There's barely any record. And that's another reason it took me 20 years, because I was trying to find out whether or not Wes had actually interacted with Manson and or the girls. I mean, I knew he was in the same facility. I knew that everybody that worked there, because I interviewed everybody that was alive. Most of them were still alive back in the late 90s and early 2000s when I did this.
Look at Lee Harvey Oswald, Ruby Kaczynski, Son of Sam, Dahmer. Anyway.
They all said, oh yeah, Charlie was, we knew it was Charlie and the girls. They come in every day or every few days to see Roger. And West was there recruiting subjects. Now West, while he was there, and in his correspondence and papers that I found, he called it a laboratory disguised as a hippie crash pad. And just like the Operation Midnight safe house, they call them safe houses, which were disguised as bordellos and that type of thing, or brothels. This was an apartment that was decked out place. He had 6 graduate students, and I have his letters to them before they came to work in this. He goes, grow your hair long, wear jeans, dress like hippies, and lure people in there. So they ran that for the summer of 67, and Wes was getting people from that Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic on Clayton Street and sending them around the corner to Frederick Street to participate in that.
Good Lord.
And I got the diaries of some of that. We have no idea something else. What does Jolly want? Why is he making us bring these people in? So
imagine doing that to graduate students, telling them to bring people in and drug them up. Imagine telling them,
well, some of them
make
liked
an apartment. I'm sure they
because
liked
they
it.
were also, encouraged to use LSD.
Yeah, I'm sure. On people. I mean, that sets up even if you leave that program and go on to do legitimate work, the ethical foundations of your career are set up in such a strange way. You're manipulating people against their knowledge.
Well, they didn't know who they were doing it for. That's why they were always questioning it.
Oh.
So, you know, I don't know how. I found one or two of them after, and they were very careful talking to me.
I'm sure they probably felt like they were going to go to jail.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. If any of these experiments or whatever was going on resulted in a death, there's no statute of limitations on murder.
Right. Right.
I mean, that's one of the biggest disappointments of my book is that people like West aren't alive, you know, to answer to this. And it was really frustrating for me because, again, his name was on the front page of the New York Times in 1977 when they had the major hearings about MK Ultra. And it identified him as the head of the psychiatry department at UCLA, a very prominent doctor, a researcher. And he said he had nothing to do with that. He'd never used LSD on humans, and he wouldn't. He said they had asked him, and he said, no. I have all these letters between him and the guy who was running the program describing how they're going to do it, hide it from his colleagues. When he started at Lackland Air Force Base. He was running the psychiatry department at the hospital there in 1952. When he was there running that hospital, that's when he started his experiments on prisoners, human subjects, and one letter to Gottlieb, he says, eventually we have to take these experiments. Well, your case?
No, I haven't.
A year after, oh, maybe Jamie did. A year after West contracted with the CIA to do these experiments, July 4th, 1954, a 3-year-old girl went missing from the parking lot of a bar at about 11 or 12 at night. Now, her parents, it was a heat wave. They couldn't sleep. They went to the bar. They brought their 2 kids. They let them play in the parking lot at midnight. The little girl disappeared. They organized a search party. About 3 or 4 hours later, they went to a gravel pit, and 2 airmen had called, or 2 itinerant guys had called the local sheriff, and said, "There's a guy here that wandered out of the brush with scratches and blood, no shirt, and he doesn't know how he got here or who he is." The police came. His name was Jimmy Shaver. He was an airman. They did a search, and they found the little girl's body not too far away, and she had been raped and murdered by this guy who had no memory of doing it. The guy had no history of violence. He had a couple kids, and he was a flight instructor at the school. He'd been in the military for a number of years. I think he was interested in preparation for the trial, Jolly West, who inserted himself into the case and then extracted his memory from him using sodium pentothal, where he admitted to the murder. Now, in the context of what we found out West was doing and what his objectives were at that same time, it raises huge questions about this was an experiment gone wrong, you know, that he was part of. During the trial, it came out that he had had treatment for severe migraines, experimental treatment at Lackland. That's another, you know, a smaller subchapter in the book. But
does it describe what kind of experimental treatment he received?
No, because nobody. I mean, I have all the testimony. There was actually a trial, a retrial, and sentencing. And every time it came up, it was really frustrating because he never testified. So it was either his wife or his mother who would talk about it. It was mostly his mother saying, well, all I knew was they wanted him to be involved in this 2-year study to try to relieve his migraines. He would have such horrible migraines, he would put his head in buckets of ice water. The people who described encountering him that night when he was arrested and immediately taken out of the sheriff's custody by the military police and brought to Lackland and then back to the sheriff's, he was in a trance. The doctors tested him for alcohol because they thought, well, maybe he's drunk. He had just a little bit of alcohol in his system, but he wasn't drunk. And after the fact, they found out that he had I mean, I don't want to get into this because it's really getting into the weeds, but he had hallucinated that this little girl was a cousin who sexually abused him as a child, and he was trying to kill her. Her name was Beth Rainbow. All this stuff came out of the trial. Jolly West in 1955 sent a report to Sidney Gottlieb, which nobody had seen, and it was another document I found in his files, announcing that he had learned how to, or developed the technology to remove true memories and replace them with false memories in a human subject without their knowledge, which was one of the main goals, the biggest goals of the MK Ultra program. And again, when the CIA, when they had the hearings in the 70s, the CIA said nothing was successful. Everything we tried was a failure. It was a waste of money. We shouldn't have done it. And not just me, but most experts think that that was a cover, that they didn't want to admit that they had developed these technologies that were effective. Found the same report where West said that he had learned how to replace true memories with false ones without a person's awareness. But they had removed that from the report and then released it to Congress. So that's a crime right there, you know. So there's a lot of that stuff in the book.
So the speculation is that this guy, through these experimental treatments, that they had dosed him up with LSD and experimented using these MK Ultra techniques and did that to him and induced some sort of...
Well, this is speculation,
Yes.
and I'll go there for this. The guy had no history of violence, never been arrested, stellar, upstanding citizen. His only problem was he had these horrible headaches. All of a sudden, he shows up by a small girl's body who'd been brutally murdered with no memory of doing it. A year earlier, Dr. West, who became a psychiatrist within a week or two, possibly had experiences with him before, but there was no record. Oh, when I tried to get the record from the medical center at Lackland, his file, that his name was Shaver, I think it was S-A to S-I, was gone. So I couldn't find out whether he had actually participated in any kind of experimental program there.
So is the speculation, and again, this is speculation, that he did commit the crime, that he was somehow or another induced into committing this crime?
Yeah. And again, this is speculation.
Yes.
It's completely circumstantial. The object, that was the ultimate goal, but to do things against their will, against their moral code.
Right,
even.
but how would they know that this child would be there? How would they know?
Oh, no. She wasn't targeted.
So was it just that they'd put it into his head to go do that to anyone?
Yeah, something clicked and went wrong.
So it wasn't a precise thing.
No,
it wasn't.
This was the very early days of experimenting with LSD in the early 1950s. West was one of the premier researchers in LSD. He had first gained national attention for being one of 4 or 5 doctors who treated Korean prisoners of war who were returned to the United States after they had made confessions of spraying the Korean countryside with illegal biological weapons. The United States said that we don't use that. That's against the Geneva Codes. And these guys were brainwashed by the North Korean, Chinese, Soviets. So when they were brought back after the war, West and 4 other psychiatrists were assigned to deprogram them. What a lot of researchers believe is that they actually brainwashed them into thinking they'd been brainwashed by the Koreans, where they actually were telling the truth, because there's a lot of evidence that's come out as recently as 5-6 years ago that we did use these weapons in Korea.
Oh boy, the old double cross.
Yeah.
That was interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna like that. I forgot to like it. And so I mean, there's so much information on MK Ultra, Midnight Climax, Bluebird, Artichoke, Paperclip, Overcast. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm showing you there's government involvement, right? And buy-in from people that just not right for the job, right? These are people that should be investigated and arrested, jailed, charged, whatever, but held accountable in a peaceful way for turning. And when I was talking about after 75 years, Vanderlub finally was essentially exonerated, and it was proven that he didn't commit the Reichstag fire, and then out of that came the consolidation of power and the oppression of political opposition, and even like over 1,000 people that had been working in government, medical institutions, and I'm back. And if anyone's still watching, thank you. I know it's very frustrating. I get it. And every time I mention certain things, it tends to like cut me off. So I'm going to try to be careful with my words, but it shouldn't take 75 years when finally the government finally releases or declassifies documents that people find out the truth about things, right? So we're only ever really finding out the truth about government involvement, multiple assets within government. So military, CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, people that are heads of the aeronautical departments. Anyways, it's unfortunate that it takes 75 years, or it has in the past. This needs to stop, because this is something that happened in the Reichstag incident with Marinus van der Lubbe. This happened on the 27th of February, 1933. So this was pre-World War II. And a lot of things would have happened possibly differently. Again, hindsight, yes, I understand that, but could have possibly ended up differently had that been called out at the time, or even shortly thereafter, even within a few years, right? Because this was 1933. This was several years before World War II kicked off, right? When political oppression was happening, when consolidation of power was happening, censorship, so much stuff was happening during this time, causing unrest, and again, destabilizing the foundation of Maslow's foundation, which is air, water, food, and shelter. Then you don't self-actualize. And then building relationships, et cetera, beyond that, and procreation also. By the way, the free with Pfizer, they were sued, and it was only because of getting sued that they had to release the VAERS that were coming out from 2021 and 2022, and because they also so when it should that no, I'm getting kicked off again. So anyway, within the justice system, people should be held accountable. And so, and I will reiterate, it should not take 75 years. It shouldn't. It's ridiculous, right? Because these are all things that impact us present day. And so we really need to re-look at the January 6th, truth about that, 9/11, Holodomor, Himmler, USS Liberty, Freedom Convoy, et cetera, and international events as well, and see what actually happened. And I share that on Rumble, Don189. My YouTube accounts get deleted. My LinkedIn, my other social media platforms have gotten deleted over the years repeatedly. And so Rumble, it's only been about 2 years that I've been on it, but at least it's 2 years of, again, I'm sharing a lot of information that people are not getting on a lot of different platforms. And yeah, so anyways, on that note, I will leave it at that. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.